Episode 243 Mid-Season Awards. Time to celebrate individuals who have had big first halves and discuss who could stand out in the heat of the summer. It's time for Dingers.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats. What's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement. Check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see. What's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head. Please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers. Ain't no minor league. This is major. Yeah, Dingers. Let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Ryan Noda that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out, we're delivering tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. Tyler Childs joined, as always, by Robert from the basement.
Good evening. Good evening.
What up? What is up?
I already told you all of the fun I'm having in my non-fantasy baseball life. But Ty, at the break in the True Test League, the real money auction league, whatever we want to call it here on the podcast, we are, I think, half a game back of each other.
We're neck and neck.
Yeah, in that we're in different divisions, but same, we're both AL teams in it, and we are half a game back. And I've got to say, I'm pretty proud of myself. For April and the first half of May, I didn't have an active first baseman. All season to this point, I have yet to have a useful shortstop, despite Kevin Smith having 8 days of usefulness for me. That's been it, because I rolled the dice on Alberto Mondesi for 5 years, and so far I've just paid money to have him not play and I think be shut down multiple times. And even though I've actively said I will trade, I will give up prospects. I even did a 2-for-1, 2 pitching prospects I liked so that I could get 2 stolen bases from David Hamilton like 2 weeks ago. I am struggling in that league. But again, my record is good. 63, 43, and 7 at the break. I'm 12th. You're 11th overall in that league. I think you're in the final playoff spot right now in that league. And you've had the same kind of holes, different positions that I have.
I've somewhat solved some of mine. DeYoung coming back from the dead was big for lineup depth.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting on Blaze Alexander out in Arizona to get the call up. Like Perdomo is not for me enough to hold him out of that spot. Especially if they're in the running down the stretch here. I see Blaze being relevant. So I like that for my stretch run. Just a lot of heaters on a guy that can hit some out. But yeah, my biggest problem right now is the last 2 weeks. I should be in like 6th or 5th or 4th, but unfortunately I had Luis Castillo and Christian Javier in my rotation for the last couple of weeks, which has not gone well. So Javier has single-handedly cost me multiple weeks.
Well, that's not something you've done wrong. Those are just individual blip and blowups. Like, I mean, I'm rocking a rotation right now headed up by JP Sears. So I am doing the best Band-Aid patchwork you can imagine. Tyler Wells, Reese Olson, Chris Murphy. And for most of you are like, who's Chris Murphy? Yeah, I know. He's a 25-year-old Boston Red Sox, not really prospect, but a prospect who's been up and been good. He sucked at AAA. They brought him up in the bullpen, and all of a sudden he got it together. I've got Colin Ray, of all guys, Brandon Belak. And I just traded for Ty. I think you'd be proud of this one. It was a 1-for-1 trade, 5 years of control for both players. I traded away my Stephen Kwan. I got back Tanner Beebe. Cleveland, a couple Cleveland guys trading. They needed outfield depth. I needed another starting pitcher. And then if fingers crossed, Grayson Rodriguez gets a call back, and some
Beebe
of my
was
injured
absolute robbery. Like, that's robbery.
I'm hoping that one pans out for me, and my first base hole, which we're going to discuss one of the guys tonight, has been filled. I did make a trade where I took on a crappy salary, but I got Yuli Gurriel, just an empty average type guy with Miami, and almost a split player while I was waiting for Votto to come back. Obviously, Votto's come back, and in his 57 at bats, he's hit 7 dingers and has 1,000 OPS. But as we know, this is like hot start, not necessarily big guns for him, because he's striking out at a stupid rate, 22 strikeouts and 57 at bats. But the walks, which is always his calling card, OBP, they're not there at the moment. He's roughly at about a 15% walk rate, but when you've got like roughly 40% strikeout rate, you're not, that's gonna work itself in a weird way. But anyway, that's just a league I thought was worth mentioning. We don't need to talk about the home league because I'm yet again not currently in the playoff format.
Pitching, what's pitching?
Yeah, but I am half a game out.
Yeah, that league's tight.
I beat the top place team, who I think at that point was undefeated. They've since lost 3 straight. The first one to me, and then I took out what at the time I think was second or third place team in Heinze. Harper's Iron Pigs is the name of that team, and I think it's time to change away from the Harper, because as much as we like Bryce Harper, we're lacking some massive power from him right now. 3 home runs and 210 at bats. And Ty, even in the Surf League, I was getting it from Ryan, who is, I think, second overall in Earth. And he was trying to give me the pep talk and help me with my lineup, asking me why I wasn't playing Bryce Harper when I desperately need an Ohtani in my lineup. And I think in the NFBC format, where Ohtani is either hitter or pitcher, he is by far the most frustrating player to own when he's as elite as he is, because no matter where you put him, he's not getting the great stats you need from that other thing he does. So I've pitched him predominantly this year, and I've lost out on, those 32 home runs, the bulk of the 32 home runs, until maybe the last 10 days, something like that, when I put him back in. And I mean, it is a tough bill to play in a 15-team league that is basically requiring 28 teams worth of starting players to be rostered. It makes it a lot less fun when it's only 15 teams doing it. It's a lot more fun when there's 30 teams and you need every single MLB player. I think that's a more exciting way for us. But anyway, that's all fantasy baseball off topic stuff.
Rant over, ladies and gentlemen. Rant is over. All good. No, it's frustrating this time of year, but this is where champions are made. You battle through it. Robbie, you did touch on like the thing that I always talk about on the show, which is like just how shitty your teams are and how successful they end up being. Like,
yeah, like my pitching example is like, that is it. And last year we do our draft in that league in August, and I drafted JP Sears at, I think, 17th overall or something like that in our prospect draft. He was still under 50 MLB innings. So I could draft him in that. And I was like, I'm going to take a chance because I think he's going to pitch, if he's SP3 and I get him right now in the first round. Zach Neto was my target. Zach Neto was long gone. And I kind of think it'd be an interesting thing to offer and trade right now. Would you take my JP Sears if your team needed pitching for a Zach Neto if your team had a bunch of shortstops? And the team in that league that has Neto would possibly do that because they happen to have Corey Seager as well. But I don't think they will, just because the name doesn't make sense yet. But I think in 3 years, JP Sears and Zach Neto could be on completely different trajectories, or they could both be like legitimate MLB players. And depending on your league settings, you do or do not care about either. So,
yeah. And in either way, the outcome could be this.
A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
Well, that was nice.
It's gonna be nice.
Well, I'm Ty tonight. I'm drinking
Pringles.
Well, it's actually a Yeti. That's a beer koozie. Like, this thing was swag from that culinary competition that I was in a couple weeks ago. I got it delayed, and it's sponsored by Pringles. So I've got the Pringles man drinking, but underneath it is a Coors Original. So I need to Google why it's not called Banquet anymore, because it's not. It's just Original everywhere. But anyway,
yeah, I don't know why either. Banquet was a way better name, way funner.
Yeah,
tasted better with the name Banquet.
It sounded more expensive, right? I am going to drink a Banquet. I don't want an original, like Coca-Cola Original. We get it, that they set the market. But anyway,
if you're going to call it original, put it in a big tall glass and call it OG.
or bottle it like the Red Stripe, which I'm
Yeah.
sure that's still, you can get that in America. The
Stubbies, yep.
Jamaican beer. Yeah, the
Mhm.
Stubbies. Those
Mhm.
that's what we really need to go back to. Let's go back to
Mhm.
the Stubbies. Enough
I
of this
agree.
aluminum.
So before we get started here, don't forget Robbie Baseball 1 at Tourney Boss at Dinger's Pod on the Twitter machine. We haven't made the full jump to Threads yet, Robbie. We're not
No,
ready to make
yeah.
that move yet.
I'd wondered if we were gonna talk about that. I would like to decline that conversation, please. Yeah.
No, we'll see about the future on that one, but I do find it very funny, just really quick on it, how much people are like, this is awesome, and it's exactly the same, right? Like it's literally not different,
Right.
and people just decided that it's somehow better.
It's
It's
new.
like I just don't even get like how you can say that out loud. Like does nothing different. Like I'm sorry.
Not that I want to hear from him, not that I want to hear from him, but I feel like Roto Ronnie would have something to say about Threads, and he's definitely on it, right? And maybe he was one of those early adapters where he went around trying to get all the great names, like people who like try to get MLB, try to get all these things so that you can try to sell it to
Yeah.
MLB later on. I'm sure somebody went around doing all that to try to get the people are like that. So they want to get credit. But tonight we are going to talk about people who have earned the credit they are about to be given. We've got some midseason awards, and then we're going to discuss a set of the awards. The Silver Slugger tie we can lead off. You can choose AL or NL. There's no debating it. These are just the guys. They are the award winners for Silver Slugger. I'll give you the choice of what league you want to go into.
Yeah, let's start in the senior circuit here, and we'll go with the NL. So at the catcher position, Sean Murphy's a guy that he's sitting at 15. He's being beaten by the rookie Francisco Alvarez at 16 home runs.
Which
for me,
is
like
crazy.
but you know what? Like Francisco Alvarez is the Josh Donaldson of catching. Like he literally has no other hits, right? So
Okay.
right.
I
So
was just thinking more like
knock.
he's not complete, right? He's not a good fantasy player, but you look at one stat and you're like, well, I mean, he's gonna get around. Like he's getting 16 dingers is also 16 runs, 16 RBI. It's like he's getting, he should be better, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Do you know what the vibe for me is Gary Sanchez, like very Gary Sanchez, like cool. You can hit the ball a mile. That's great. You do literally nothing else. Like
you mean my catcher in our home league, Gary Sanchez?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just like Gary Sanchez has finally found his home in a place that they don't really care about winning. They just are happy to spend money in San Diego.
Well, but your concern with Alvarez is that we're not going to see a career. We're going to see a power surge and some phony excitement, something to that degree.
I don't know. Like I like the hit tool was okay in the minors. Like okay, it wasn't great. It wasn't elite. The power's always been real. Like great. It feels like there's going to be a lack of contact over time, and he's certainly not good enough defensively to like justify it, right? So, DH only is likely the outcome here, and I think it's going to happen relatively fast. But I am concerned that the hit tool is not going to be good enough to hold on to that. Like Nolan Gorman comes to mind. Like we're talking about the same cut of cloth here, right? Like the same kind of splits. So I don't know. I'm not vibing on that. Good for him, home run wise. I definitely don't. I'm not buying at this point. That's for sure.
Okay. Keep running. You take the whole NL, man. Take one B through.
So in the home league, or in a couple leagues, I've stacked Braves. That True Test being one of them. I have Matt Olson. It's been very handy between the walks and the home runs. He doesn't really do much outside of those two things. It's a walk or a dinger. That's pretty much the extent of Matt Olson. It's been great. Your boy Pete Alonso's in here. Forgot to show up, set the alarm for the home run derby.
He's already got a belt. He didn't need to.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe it was just because it was the fish market, and he's like, "Listen, I'm a polar bear. I'm a little distracted here, out in Seattle." But I really don't know what happened there. But yeah, I mean, the Mets are going to be interesting. Like Buster Olney was on something today, just going on and on about how the Mets are still trying to win. It's like,
right.
Listen, you're playing the Dodgers, you're going to lose. Yeah, but you're playing the Dodgers out of the gate here. You're going to lose 2 or 3. And your season's effectively over. Like you're too far back. If you win 7 straight, cool, you're in it. But the odds of that Mets team doing that are very unlikely. So they're a mystery. Like they can't be. They're not as bad as their record, but it's kind of like the Cardinals. Like you're just out of it. Like it's too late. So I don't know. It would have to be a crazy second half for them to cut in. But if they do, Alonso's going to have to be at that 50 mark. It's just the way it's going to need to be. He's going to have that kind of second half to drive that roster. Second base, awesome split here. Betts with 23 bombs. Muncy on the same team, funny enough, with 20 bombs. And then Ozzy Albies, who was one of my favorite guys for a bounce back, Robbie. We talked about this at the surf draft. Just as a guy that people are like, oh, he forgot how to hit home runs. Like, well, not really. He just has had hurt hands like for years. So generally, and we've talked about this years ago, Robbie, like broken hands tend to be a dip in power. Great opportunity to buy. Ozzy Albies on the way back up. No surprise from the other two guys, Albies and Betts at second base. But if I'm betting on this, it's got to be Betts in the long run of this for the season. But I like Albies to make that run. Double up with Muncy here at third base. Gorman obviously hasn't hit a home run since like May, but had a really nice start. He's still up in the leaders at the position, even though he's really more of a second baseman there too.
He does have 15 games tie at third base.
Correct.
That's why I put him in. I double checked to make sure like I was, not because like Betts as well, right? Betts has played 3 positions in bulk, but he is of the eligible second baseman, like basically eligible across all platforms. Betts has the most. Muncy eligible across all formats. Third base has the most. So you can get technical but that's why some of the guys are on twice.
No, you're good. No, I'm just rhyming them off. Yep. Okay. And then the real third baseman in St. Louis, Arenado, is also at 17. So a little bit of an interesting one there. There's a guy in Cincinnati that could enter this equation if he gets red hot too.
Season's end, yeah.
Yep. So just interesting there. Shortstop, we got Lindor, who is a sneaky pick for this one, right? I think a lot of people would have not had him there.
I was shocked when I saw it. I just didn't think Lindor was hitting power but again, he's like wily veteran on a Mets team that you think should be better, but his stat line looks pretty good.
And for those of you that are MLB The Show players, catchers like him because he wears cologne. It's one of the sound bites. Yeah, it's really annoying. It's a terrible little story, but anyway, Christopher Morel though at 15 home runs. That's a fun one. He spent half the season in the minors.
Yeah,
right?
and he was amazing in the minors. Imagine if Joe Adell was up. If Joe Adell was up.
Yep. These are things that like we've talked about, but outfield here in the NL, Schwarber, Soler, and Acuna, which is awesome because Acuna has been just unreal across the board. And Soler and Schwarber are basically the same player, right? Like boom or bust. Like just it's either they're playing Yahtzee or they're flipping the table, right? So that's just pretty much how she goes. But it's a really interesting split here, Robbie. Like it's not a lot of like superstars. Like there is some stars here, but like you're just not. It's a very mundane list here for the NL side. That's why I wanted to pick on them a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like it's consistent, right? There's a lot of veterans here. There's a lot of guys you expect to do well. There isn't like outside of Morel, there isn't a standout that you're like, whoa, they're there. Like to your point, like they didn't start the year with the big club and they've been slowly earning and carving out time within that. When we move to the AL here, I mean,
before you do really quick, I just want to ask one thing. Is there anybody not on this list that you think is going to win one of these positions?
I didn't dive really deep to see who would be like 5 or 6 dingers back at any one of the positions. So I would say overall though, like I can see Acuna having the most for outfielders because he's just been so damn good, but it's almost detrimental when he does hit a dinger because then he's not stealing a base. And he's been doing that so much.
I think you're going to see.
I don't see anybody off the list.
In the outfield. I think Tatis is going to be the number one in the outfield. And there's multiple outfield ones to give away, but I think Tatis is still gonna be the leader in that clubhouse. He's only 3 or 4 back, and he's missed most of the season, right? So I think. But
the juice usually, when you cycle down like with amphetamines, the testosterone levels continue to go. So by the time we're hitting September, he's going to be pretty maxed out, I think. Yeah,
I just firmly believe the Padres are going to be one of the second best team or one of the best teams in the second half. Right, like you're adding Cole Hamels, like come on, That's got to be enough, right? Like
They've added Cole Hamilton. That's like saying they've already added Rugnan Odor and Gary Sanchez.
yeah,
So
right.
the final piece of this puzzle is
Yeah.
Cole. Like, talk about scraping the bottom of the barrel. But again, you traded a lot of not that they would have pulled up any of the players they traded for Soto last year, but you've traded a lot of your prospect depth in order to have a superstar, and you've traded and signed superstars like Machado. Blake Snell's having a great year. There's a way in which they could possibly trade a Snell and still end up in a better position rest of season and next year. Like, it's one of those weird addition by subtractions from a great player, because the likelihood is that Snell will walk. If Snell is traded, that makes him more valuable to the market for his free agency, because then he can't get competitive balance pick, whatever it's called. I like that I can't remember this basic off-season thing. But anyway, he can't get offer. Thank you. He can't get a qualifying offer, which means that his selling price for the Padres should be even higher, because it should include, what do the Padres deem to be a competitive balance round pick, plus whatever they think the value of Snell is. I think that would be the best move the Padres could make to save their skin for a few things. And I just don't know who the landing, like, where would you want to send him? That's not going to hurt your chances. So, which means AL for the playoffs, and what team would be willing to say, like, here are 4 or 5 dudes, if that's the right, mix.
I just think if you unload Snell, you got to unload Soto right behind him. I just don't know how you
still have another year of Soto though, right? Soto's not in his walk year.
This is it.
No,
this is it for Soto. Are you sure?
No. Yeah. Soto's got another year. Yeah.
Are you sure?
I am going to fake my confidence level with this one. I'm pretty sure that when they made the trade for him, they had 2 years plus the rest of last year with him.
Signed through 2023.
So this is it for Soto. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
that was pretty
interesting.
Although he's arbitration. No, you're right. Arbitration for next year. You're right.
There we go.
You're right.
So he wasn't a super 2, I guess. Anyway, we'll go to the AL here. Like I said, it's also veteran laden, but there are some more intriguing names, in my opinion, to this list. We'll get to those guys. Catcher, Silver Slugger is Sal Perez. First base, Isaac Paredes. Who would have thought that? Both those guys have 15. Paredes also wins for second base. That's thanks Tampa Bay. But second to him would be Brandon Drury, who I can't believe is doing it with the Angels, but he is not the player he was last year. It's a little modified version of the guy. Third base, Rafael Devers. And he's not doing what I need Devers to do. And the 2 leagues I've got him in, very frustrating player for me this year, despite the 20 dingers. Shortstop is Bo Bichette with Toronto at 15. Outfield, the trio of outfielders is Luis Robero's 25. That is second most in the AL. Aldolis Garcia has 22, and Aaron Judge, who was missed time, has 19. And then, of course, DH, which there wasn't a standout one with the NL because a bunch of these guys play DH, but obviously we know Ohtani is a DH only, and he's leading Major League Baseball with 32. The other guys at first base who were very close were Joey Gallo, who no one cares about. However, just keep in mind there's 15 dingers right there. And then Jake Raley with Tampa Bay, who's had one hell of a year, multi-position guy. Nobody in any 30-team league wanted him when the year started. He's been a steal for everybody who's picked him up. I've got him in a few leagues because I was fortunate enough to be looking for someone very early in April and got him. At second base, Gleyber Torres with the Yankees has 13. Third base, we've got Jake Berger with the White Sox, who has 18, and some young guy named Jung with Texas, who's got 17. I don't know who that is, Ty. Shortstop for Baltimore is Mr. Henderson, who's got 13. And that's the list. Like I said, there's some more youth on this one than there is with the NL side. But Berger really surprises me on this list, like as a guy who I wouldn't have thought. But I also have to admit, Isaac Paredes having 15 and leading in 2 positions does surprise me more. The power seems to clearly be in the NL right now.
I think we're going to see a big boom in the second half. Like you've got, Nate Lowe, who was a second half performer last year, isn't far back in this list. Vladdy, I think the home run derby is the best thing that could have happened to Vladdy. He could be real relevant there. But I don't know any other contenders in the AL at first base that I can think of off the top of my head. Right? Maybe Rizzo could sneak in here, but that would be the only other guy that I can think of quickly here. Oh,
yeah.
I was gonna say Alvarez could sneak into a first base slot, but I don't think he's gonna play enough games.
Oakland is about to call up. Is it Tommy Soderstrom that they're calling up?
He's up
Who is it?
already. Yeah, he's up. They made it official.
Yeah, so he's my new catcher in the home league. For everybody who's keeping score here, he's going to predominantly be DH first because I don't think they want to rock the boat with the catching situation. Now, although he was not great with the 254, 303, 536 slug, he did have 20 dingers in 69 games. So we've seen previous Matt Olson, who at the time was with Oakland, come up and have massive late season surges. I think he had 18 in like 2.5 months, something like that. We could, let's think maybe there could be something out of Soderstrom here. Dynasty leagues, obviously he's owned everywhere. The best thing that can happen for a dynasty owner who wants Tommy Soderstrom and doesn't have him is that he comes out and falls flat on his face, does the Miguel Vargas first half of this year, and then you can go get him this offseason because he's still so young. But if you rostered him, if he's already on your team, you want to see him come strong out of the gate in Oakland. I don't know who else on this list could explode. Obviously, Judge could win this. He and Ohtani could be neck and neck come September if Judge is healthy and Ohtani just keeps clicking at the rate he's going right now. Like we're talking about a guy who's going to approach 60 dingers after he had a career year last year. He's been the number 2 player in 8x8 as a hitter, just as a hitter. And then as the pitcher, like as just the pitcher, I think he's a top 20. Let me double check because we haven't yet had a post All-Star game, so it's still locked in. He's further back. He's 72. So combined, the second best hitter or the second best player and the 72nd best player is actually one player. So Ohtani's been excellent. But anyway, on this list, I find the White Sox having a couple guys interesting. And I mean, they're just an interesting team that has not got it together this year. There could be a few trades. Talk about starting pitchers moving with Snell. We could see Gio leaving to go somewhere. Gio relocating. Did that one work better? Let me know
That's a
at Dinger's Pod.
Well, but here's the crazy part though. Like if you can sit here and say the Mets are still alive, the White Sox are still alive, right? But unfortunately, the White Sox have a very similar scenario where they play Atlanta to open, right? So they're going to find themselves in the exact same conversation. I don't see them not trading. Like they're different than the Mets. Like they're in a you need to burn it down kind of scenario. They still have some prospect depth, right? That you keep Robert, you keep Eloy, and you trade literally everybody else, right? And you burn it down from there.
Well, they have done the burn it down, Chris Sale thing. They did it. They brought in a new
but they
roster
screwed it up,
guys.
Right?
Yeah. They didn't have it click, which was the big thing. And they did, Lance Lynn is a free agent, and they had Reynaldo Lopez, who had one good year, and then they tried. Nothing against trying to get your guy to recapture his glory, but they tried really hard to make it work with him. Giolito went from a terrible season where they gave him all the rope in the world, which the Nationals have been doing with Josiah Gray, which I think could pay similar dividends, moving forward. Although Gray was an all-star this year, but it just didn't come together. So I don't know that they want to do the secondary burn it down. They might want to do the modified, let's get some AAA type prospect-y people.
But they have that. Through. They've got lots of those guys, right? They still have, if you go and replace your middle infield depth, that team's fine, right? Like if you go Berger, Vaughn, Eloy, Robert, that's your starting building block. You've got Colas, you've got Cespedes coming, right? Lennon Sosa is still gonna figure it out, right? You have enough already. Go get a couple pitchers. You can get even if Tim Anderson's struggling, a trade is the best thing that's going to happen to that guy, right?
Well, that's where you don't burn it down, though, right? What you're saying, burn it down, but then you're explaining it as they do have all these pieces. So what I'm saying is you go and get more of those not MLB but close to guys in exchange for a couple of your, Anderson and Giolito, let's say, which for dynasty owners out there, if you move Giolito to a team that is, defensively solid and in a good spot, his rest of season or post MLB deadline could be very positive for you moving forward.
He's going to be a Dodger. This is a fact.
Geez. Well, what are they going to do with Thor?
like I don't know, send them back to where they got them. Like what a terrible signing. That
Send it
was.
back to the Angels. Yeah, that one hasn't worked out well. And even my thought of if you don't think, if you think he's going the Kenny Powers route of consistently losing power and his temper, which
Yeah.
by the way, tonight I got Jess to sit down and we watched the pilot episode of Eastbound and Down. And this is how I sold. So anybody out there who's thinking about it, you sell it to your wife. You say it's got, she likes the movie Moneyball. So I said it's like Moneyball meets your teaching experiences, because in the first episode he becomes a teacher. So I sold it to her that way. So I don't know how many more episodes I'm going to get where we're watching it together.
One. You have exactly one. What's the answer to that question?
But I rewatched it. Her one takeaway from that episode was, I don't know anything about cocaine, but it seems like that's a lot that they just had right there. Anyway, so let's move on to some guys who are speedy. Speaking of narcotics, speed, that's a drug, right? We're addicted to speed as fantasy guys. Captain Transition right here. We have the Speed Demon Awards. So coming in at 5th is rookie Corbin Carroll, who's got 26, who had 2 over the weekend leading up to the All-Star break, which is cool. Bobby Witt Jr. with Kansas City. He's about the only thing going right with the Royals right now, 27 for him. Wander Franco quietly, 28, very quietly putting that together. And then you got the 2 big dogs. You've got Ronald Acuna Jr. with 41, and you've got Oakland outfielder Asturi Ruiz, who we talked about last year, second half. We kind of did a breakdown on how things were coming together. This was this is a 2018 prospect, like a long forgotten guy, and then got moved from San Diego to Oakland. And, he's doing well. The last 30 days, just to update so that it's a little more relevant for those of you who are thinking about potential big second half guys. Acuna's got 13. Ellie De La Cruz with Cincinnati's got 12. Ruiz has 12. JT Friedel with Cincinnati has 10, and Julio Rodriguez has entered the chat, ladies and gentlemen, with 10. Julio started very cold and then was very mixed into May and June, and has now kind of turned it on the last 3 weeks or so. And Julio's now looking like that all category guy that we wanted. But this season stat line is going to be affected by the slower start that he had. But to see that in the last 30 days he's been getting the bags, that's a real positive thing. So, Ty, I know you're not a big stolen base guy. That's why I stole this category from you. Thank you. All of these speed puns.
Yeah, I totally zoned out on that one.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But anyway, that's just the update for that. Let's go with, we're down to walk this way winners.
Yep. This is your other power category. So I'll just go through it quickly here, because
okay,
as much as I'm usually middle of the pack on walks, like just in general. But walk this way, Soto obviously at the top. That's, you can pretty much knock that out for the foreseeable future. Ian Happ is one that I wouldn't have had up this high. Like, definitely an improvement for him. I think he's in a walk year as well. I believe, or did they re-sign him? Actually, now that I say that, they might have re-signed him.
I feel like Happ has an extension, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, Schwarber's another guy that's on the list here with 58. Does have 111 Ks though, and that is, somewhat common on this list, Robbie, right? So working backwards, Soto's at 77, Ian Happ's at 90. And it's interesting, like, as a Jays fan, like, the Giants were just in, and Buck and Dan Schulman on the broadcast were talking about how many strikeouts the Giants had, because they see so many pitches, because they walk a little bit. So it's a common trait, right? In order to get to the deep counts, you're going to strike out sometimes. That's just a reality. Ryan Noda, former Jays prospect, former Dodgers prospect, now Oakland A's superstar. 59 walks, 103 strikeouts.
Superstar Ryan Noda. The superstar Rule 5 pick, Ryan Noda. But this is an accomplishment to be at. Sorry, I just realized Adley Rutschman does not have 545 walks.
Yeah, Ryan Noda is not a bad player, though, right? He's one of those guys that was depth in the Dodgers organization. He, like, you and I both talked about him.
One-time Blue Jay Farhan. Yep.
Yeah, like, we liked him, and I still think there's more to what he is. I mean, it's hard to.
He was Ross Stripling trade. Is that right, Ty? That sounds right to me, anyway, because I can't think of another trade that the Dodgers and Jays made. So
yeah, I think you're right on that one. And then Adley Rutschman is a nice one here. Like, Adley's just such a well-rounded player. 55 walks, 54 Ks. Like, That's obviously the leader of this group here on that one. And then the aforementioned Matt Olson, 54 walks, 105 Ks. So, pretty much a trend here. It speaks to Adley, right? Like how good of a hitter Adley is and how much plate discipline he has. Like he is just a ball player. He's fun. I hope they move him off catcher before they ruin him. I want to see him hit for years.
Well, Soto did start slow this year. He K'd more than he normally does, but since that point, both he and Rushman are the only two on the list who have more walks than strikeouts. But again, credit to Rushman on not having the high K count, especially when you see power being the big thing that everybody's excited for, right? He's taken the walks from the catcher position. Yep. It's great.
Yep, definitely. Well, I think the other part of this one too, Robbie, like of that group, Rushman's the only one with a respectable batting average, right? The rest of them are like Soto's had a good stretch here recently, but Adley is I believe he's at like 275 or something in that ballpark.
I'm just going to quickly check on where Soto is sitting because he was rough to start.
He did have a good stretch
now,
so he's
but again, right? Yeah, 265, 286 the last 30 days.
What's Rushman at right now? Do you have that?
I will have that in a moment. The next category we'll stick to Rushman, but the next category will be the you down with OBP. Rushman is 273, and he's been 272 the last month, super consistent. So credit again to him on that. Next category up is you down with OBP. The leaders to this point, Luis Ariz with Miami, who was also 2 for 2 in the All-Star game, 434 OBP for him. Juan Soto, we knew he'd be on the list, 419. Acuna, 408, which is excellent.
That's
for
a big
Acuna.
Bump for him.
Yep. That was one of the things that people were talking about last year was, he wasn't taking walks. It always has the Ks, right? Yandy Diaz with Tampa Bay, 408 also. And Lamont Wade Jr., the surprise of this list, 404. Well, the surprise of this list, because you look at the other names and you think Ariz, contact, doesn't strike out much. Soto takes the walks. Acuna is supposed to take the walks. And then Yandy Diaz does take the walks, and that's the whole thing. But to see Lamont Wade Jr., this is good for him.
What's good for my True Test team. He's a staple of that roster. And he's very much a similar player to Yandy Diaz. For those of you that aren't familiar with him, very, very similar. One of the best nicknames in baseball too, Late Night Lamont. Just a phenomenal nickname.
258 at bats for him this year, Ty. So he's definitely he's exceeded last year's at bat totals. I know he had an injury last year, but he's been
shaking the splits a little bit too. Like he was definitely like right-handed pitching heavy, and then this year he started to skew that a little bit. So that's been a big bump for him. And he had a good series watching him when he was in Toronto. He's just a solid hitter. He very, very much reminds me of Yandy. So it's good for him. Comeback player of the year here, Robbie. This first one is very near and dear to me because I've been going on about him for years about how good he is. Corey Seager, and he's exactly what I've been trying to tell everyone. He just is finally relatively healthy, even though he did miss like a month this season. But he's been great. The aforementioned Yandy Diaz obviously decided to hit home runs, but really hasn't hit any outside of the All-Star game since like May. So there's a really, really long stretch in his season where the home runs have gone away. It's still a lot for him career-wise, but it is back to the norm here since the end of May. So just something to keep a note. Like if you're a Diaz owner and you can sneak a trade in, like if you're expecting him to give you that well-rounded, if you want the average, the on base and the stuff that Yandy does, like cool, that's great. But if you're looking for him to be a top 50 fantasy player, it's just not what he is. So if you're looking to control that asset, trade him now because that power will start to dip. The OPS will dip. All that stuff is going to happen in the second half. He's still going to be a good player, but he's just not going to be a top 50 guy like he's been.
The last month, Ty, he's only had one dinger. But the reason that he's on this list versus some of the others, again, the AL was a little difficult for me to find like an obvious one for. Seager was an obvious one. The next guy's an obvious one. But Yandy was somebody who I think people were disappointed last year, despite the 296 average, despite the 824 OPS, only 3 stolen bases, only 9 dingers, and less than 60 RBIs. This year, all of those things have been, by percentage outside of stolen bases, have been up considerably. Like he's 43 RBIs at the break right now. Last year he had 71 runs, which for somebody who's batting almost 300, should have more. But again, it's the power, right? He's not even driving himself in. Right now, he's got 58 though to the point this year. So we are seeing that improvement. That he wasn't gone, right? He was good last year, but as far as comeback or maybe excelled, really he's not in the running when we get to it. Is what I'm saying. So,
no, I mean he's been great. Like there's no argument about how good he's been. All I'm highlighting is that the power number is going to go away. That's just it. The last guy, I love this one, Robbie, because you've been on him for years. You loved him. I think Tampa is the best possible place for him. And that's Jose Siri in center field, 805 OPS, 16 bombs, 7 stolen bases, actually lower than I thought it would be. I haven't paid attention to his stolen bases, but I would have guessed that number's higher because that guy runs like the wind.
The reason I think the stolen bases aren't as high is because he's been getting the power. I think it's like if you count the two, I've talked about this before, you count the two categories as one. For him to have 23 at the break this year, massive improvement. Again, this was a cast off from Houston. Last year, they just didn't give him consistent playing time. Corey Julks is getting a fairer shake this year than Siri had last year, but look what Siri is doing in Tampa Bay. Also, Tampa Bay understanding how to use him defensively, right? Like they finally were able to let Kiermaier go. So between these three, Seager, Diaz, and Siri, Ty, who's your vote for the AL comeback player?
It's got to be Seager. I think he's the obvious pick. He's marketable. I think it's Texas, a team that's going to be good. I think that's just the way the vote goes. I think it's a no-brainer there. What about you? Are you seconding? Or are you going to go in Jose?
No, I agree because we are going from a 245 average last year to a 353, a 772 OPS, which is fine. But now we're at a 1026. We've got the walks on a similar trajectory to last year, but we're looking at everything but power is looking like it's going to be exceeding last year at this point. And again, 12 dingers at the half, that's tied with Vlad. We can see big halves from a couple guys, and he could be back up in the 30s. So I'll give it to Siri. I'll give it to Seager and hope that Siri just is really good second half.
Yep. On the NL side, we've got Candelario in Washington, which is a great story. Great sign by the front office. I think that's something, we talked about
dividends in a month.
Definitely. We talked about this being a potential bounce back guy. This is a good signing by Washington. Ketel Marte is a guy I love because very similar to Ozzy Albies, who's next on the list here. Like everyone just gave up on Marte. He had like one down year and they're like, listen, this guy sucks. It's like, I don't think so. Like he's been exactly what everyone wants him to be. He's not Robert Acuna, right? He's just not. Stop pretending that he is. He's just a good player.
Acuna? Did you just mix like Robert and Ronald Acuna, or were you meaning to say Ronald Acuna?
Well, I don't know. It just came out. Whatever I said.
You just said like two good outfielders.
Stand by it.
Okay. I just want to know, because if you're thinking Ronald Acuna, yeah, like he's not that, but Luis Robert, he's currently better than right now. So
I just think Kettle's one of those guys that everyone believed could be the superstar. They're like, this guy's going to be that. Agree. Right? They built him up to be that, and that's what I was trying to get at.
Very unfair to him.
Yeah, whether it's Robert or Acuna, it doesn't really matter, because they're both in that breath, right? Like Marte he could be this guy, and he never was going to be that guy. He's just this guy, and this guy's a very good player. Same with Albie, he's very similar. And Ha-Seong Kim in the end here, Robbie, is just what a roller coaster for Ha-Seong Kim. This is a guy that I think San Diego should trade, right? This is a guy that you could unload to Chicago for potentially Lance Lynn, right? Like that's a move you do, right?
If you want to take that on, right? Kim's got what, $5 million a year. He's got this year and 2 left, but he's a legit shortstop.
But that's what I mean. But it's a perfect move for Chicago because then they can turn around and trade Tim Anderson, right? So that's why I think it makes sense. So I think it's a move that San Diego should make, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right, so we've got 4 nominees. I think this is obviously more competitive than the AL for sure. Should we just maybe eliminate one, and then that way we can just say here's the top 3, and then we'll try to, because I think this is going to be tough to hash out personally. I don't have the guy right now as we're talking. I would say of the 4, the guy I'm least interested in giving a comeback award to is Albies, because the other 3 to me are all more deserving for comeback. Because Albies, although obviously doing well, I don't think his story is to the same level for fantasy owners as those who drafted Kim very high, like myself.
But of that group, he's
those
the
who
only.
traded for Marte, those who gave up on Candelario, Albies you kept. No one should have traded Albies.
But of that group, he was the only one that was actually hurt. The other guys just sucked.
It's not come back from injury. It could come back from irrelevance, right? Come back from, the dungeon. So, okay, sure. All right. So let's just say, who's your pick, or who personally to you? I'm saying Albies is my least interesting guy.
I think very similar to Seager, Albies is going to be the guy that wins it. But the pick I'm going to make here is actually Candelario. And I think it's going to be based on the fact that he gets traded to a competitor down the stretch, and a nice double, like switch hitting bat off the bench is going to hype his story a little bit more. You're going to hear more about it. You're hearing nothing about him in Washington, right? But send him to, I don't know, Miami, for example. I don't think that's where he goes, but like just as an example, he's going to be on TV. They're going to talk about him more. He's going to get press, right? So that's a guy that I could see winning it with a solid finish, with the right trade. But if not, it's going to be Albies in my mind.
I can agree and give it to Candelario with you. I think Marte has had the biggest return because he was once, dominant and is now back to that. But my personal pick, like I said, because of drafting him high and like eating it last year, is Ha-Seong Kim. In one league, I traded him, I think in week 2 for Brady Singer. And I was like, good riddance. I just can't figure it out with you. And I'm done. And now I am so desperate for a shortstop in that league. And Brady Singer has been so frustrating as a pitcher on the other end of it that I'm thinking about Kim more this year than I was last year, because in that particular league where I traded him away, I need him so bad. And I have him in another league, and it's not the same. But Candelario, just so we're clear here to the listener out there, in 429 very frustrating at bats last year, had 49 runs. This year, in 100 less, he's got 46. Same number of home runs, 13 this year. He's only 7 back of his RBI total from 2022. He's got 43. Last year, he had 50. He has 5 stolen bases, which is amazing. 4 in the last month. 30 walks, which is more than last year, 74 strikeouts. He's around the same on the K percentage, which is fine. He's not a troublesome strikeout guy. The average is 40 points higher. He's at 261, and his OPS is 815. So Candelario doing great things for himself. Like you said, Ty, this is a guy we knew was good. This is someone who came in early. He was a White Sox, traded to Detroit in one of those blockbuster deals. He was a headliner coming back. Never was able to make it click in Detroit to a consistent basis, but he also had times where he was good. He just never was good and then took the next step up, as Marte had, as Albies has, and as Kim is hopefully in the midst of right now. So anywho, let's move on to some youth. We've got Rookie of the Year. We've got AL and NL. Ty, what would you like to start with first?
Let's do the NL because I love the AL group.
Yeah, AL overall is like fun. Yeah. Not that the NL doesn't have good players, but
it's fact. And this list will corroborate that. So the list here for the NL side is Francisco Alvarez, Corbin Carroll, James Outman, Steer in Cincinnati, and Yuri Perez in Miami. So Yuri Perez demoted for inning restrictions here over the All-Star break.
Not performance. Yeah, not performance based.
There was some people I'm sure that lost their mind, but it is Miami. So there you go. But for me, this list is simple, Robbie. It's Corbin Carroll by a mile. It's not even close. Like, I don't even think there's any debate here. If there is a debate, you're crazy. Yuri Perez could have a good second half, and I still don't think he puts a candle to Carroll. Yeah,
Carroll's a legitimate fantasy player, and our award here is for fantasy relevance. And as exciting as Perez's career outlook is, Corbin Carroll is actually getting it done right now, which is something that we were debating a lot, as a prospect. What were we going to get from him? The stolen bases has been the major asset for him. The fact that, he's 20 plus, I think he was sitting at 26, we said earlier in the show. That's huge. And there are concerns with some people I know who know baseball, who are talking about things going on with his shoulder, not knowing exactly what they're going to get, potential for for an injury that could have a long absence from baseball. We're not seeing it right now, but for some reason there's concern over it. So until that happens, we're going to just stick with the healthy guy. I think Carroll is the standout here. Outman came out so hot in April into May, and then the power just disappeared for him. I'm not sure if the Dodgers asked him to make a slight change and it really kind of messed with him. I'm hoping over the last week he's been able to, finish up into the All-Star break. He rounded off a little better, had, I think, a 2 home run weekend series before, and I'm hoping to watch some tape and he's going to be straight. Spencer Steer, we also had talked about before the show, multi-position eligible guy now, but losing playing time when Votto's hot, when you've got Elliott third, and your outfielders are all hitting, including, Will Benson, who I don't think the expectation was for him to be taking time away. His best case scenario was going to be platoon. Now they're looking to give Will Benson just playing time in every game. It's like you get the right pitching matchup, you're going to put him in, and Steer could, not that he doesn't suck, but he might be the odd man out or in more of a platoon situation. And then Alvarez, we already talked about, we broke him down earlier. So
I agree.
We're giving it to Carroll. Congratulations, Corbin Carroll. The AL tie, I'll ramble off the names and then we can discuss. We've got Henderson with Baltimore. We've got Yoshida with Boston, who's been much better than I thought, but you expect a 28-year-old, 29-year-old to be very good. Josh Jung with Texas. Cano with Baltimore. I wanted to just have on RP here. I know he's not yet the closer, but he's got a good stat line. Miller with Seattle, the starting pitcher. Brayan Bello. I believe he was under 50 innings, so I put him in. If I'm wrong, suck it. And then basically all of the Cleveland rotation. You've got the combination of, Gavin Williams, Allen, and Bibby all up. Well, I guess Allen's back down now, but just like the youth within Cleveland, maybe they're more of a mention than they are like a potential candidate here. So I really am happy with how Cleveland has done what I said before the season. They had all this depth. They could use it. They have been to the point now, like they DFA'd, a starter. They're also possibly in a position where they could deal, they could deal Bieber. They could make we've talked about some of those deals before. They could make a deal now. It's not going to be seen as a bad thing if they do that, because there's still more depth in the system if they need it. But Ty, who's, talk to me about this list. Obviously Jung is a fantasy preference for you preseason, but how do you feel about the rest of the guys?
Yeah, I'd like, for me, it's absolutely Jung to win this one. I just think he's the most rounded guy. He's been consistent, and I think we're gonna see a little bit more power from him. Like, he could win the Silver Slugger. We had him in that list earlier. Very easily could be that guy there. Yoshida, you mentioned it, has been awesome. The only knock on Yoshida here, and the reason I don't think he's gonna win, is the power stats just aren't that impressive. Right, he's got very mediocre Alex Verdugo kind of vibes. So I just think he's
great average, right?
Yeah,
like 316 average. OPS is fine, but to your point, 10 dingers, not getting it done, and 6 stolen bases as well. So if you're doing that double count, 16 combined is not helping fantasy owners as much as you want it to.
Yeah, it's just one of those guys that doesn't fit the general profile of who wins the voting. Henderson is a wild card for me. Like, he was a second half performer last year. So, he could be a guy that has a strong finish here. Bibby is the guy that I would pick in Cleveland. It's not going to be Allen. It could be Williams, could be relevant. But I think by the time we get through here, I don't think it's going to be Cano. I think Cano's stuff just plays out of the zone too much, and as good at it as it is, I think there's going to be a little dip in the second half. They're not going to give it to a reliever that's not a closer. So I just don't see him winning because of those things.
I want to mention
Miller,
this part. Just one moment. 42 and 2/3 innings this year for Cano. He had 18 last year. He's got a 1.48 ERA. Last year, an 11.50. Maybe he should have been in the comeback player title. 1-1 record both years.
And he might win the comeback player, actually, now that you say it. Like, he very easily could be that guy.
23 save holds this year to this point, which is amazing for somebody who was not at all a fixture in Baltimore bullpen last year, to very quickly been given that responsibility. No, not Jose Soriano. Who's the Angel Soriano?
Jose.
Is it Jose Soriano?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. Thank you. So this is a guy who was a number 1 Rule 5 pick, went to Pittsburgh. He was hurt. They did the IL thing, and then they sent him back, or released or whatever, went back to the Angels, and then did not do anything last year at all. He's been up early this year. 14 innings pitched, 23 Ks, 3.21 ERA. But the bigger, more important thing to me, 7 save holds. in those 14
Soriano's
innings.
stuff's filthy too. If you haven't had a
Yes.
chance to watch it, it's filthy.
Like he's going to be short-lived career, possibly because of the injury. You know, like we got a single TJ, maybe he's double Tommy John. Actually, I think he's double Tommy John. So like approach with caution, but he hasn't had a big enough footprint to put on the AL list, but he's another one of those RPs, and he came on late. So we'll eliminate Cano from the mix here. But sorry, you were talking Miller before I interrupted.
Yeah, like Miller for me, it just doesn't have enough stuff to be the guy. Like he's got the fastball, obviously, which is awesome. But it's just I think he's gonna struggle, you know, very similar to what's his face last year? The other guy, starter, fastball guy.
Kirby?
Thank you. Yep. Like he's very similar to Kirby to me. Like polish may come, right? And we've seen the development for Kirby this year, obviously. I think Miller could be the same guy, but we're a year away. I just don't see the numbers being good enough here. Brian Bello is the other guy. So for me in this list, it's Henderson, Jung, and Bello. Those are the realistic guys. If we were to pick three, Bibby is the one that I'm going to put on the outside. And I would say Miller and Williams are wild cards. But I think it's going to be between Henderson, Jung, and Bello by the time we get done, because Bello's been basically unhittable over the last 30 days.
I fudged up. Bello had 57 in a third. I thought he had 47 in a third. So he's actually ineligible. Brayan Bello, you are not eligible for Rookie of the Year. My mistake. Right. My apologies. So you now Bibby need to enter. Yeah, you now need to enter another guy.
Yeah, Bibby's in. So I mean, for me, it really realistically is most likely Henderson versus Jung, right? I think that's what it is, and I think it's going to be Jung. I just think he's the right guy, and it's Young for those that are super fancy on the pronunciation. We're not. For those,
we pride ourselves on not being. Yeah, and last year Henderson had 116 at bats, so he was close to exceeding rookie numbers, but he did not. And for fantasy purposes, like some people are going to say, oh, he was on the roster for 45 days. Yeah, Fantrax doesn't care if he was on the roster for 45 days. They need 130 at bats or 50 innings pitched in order for them to lose rookie eligibility. You're not getting 45 days out of a fantasy league. You will have people quit leagues if you switch to 45 days worth of service time. So Henderson has not been electric dynamite, but he has also held his own and has been improving as the year goes on. So yeah, including a double homer a week before the All-Star game. So
well, and that's it. Like he's definitely going to get a little bit better. And his second half last year was strong. Like if you look at what his minor league numbers were, and then how he finished last season, there's just enough there to get excited about his hard contact. And that's, if you look at the underlying stuff, Robbie, that's the other thing. Like the underlying number suggests he should be better than he's been. So if you look at all that stuff, that's why I think he's in there, because he's a good ball player. So I think we're going to talk about him down the stretch, but that's it for the rookies. Let's move into the pitching side. Cy Young on the AL is an interesting group here. I think right now the leader in the clubhouse is Nathan Eovaldi, which is insane. But he's been absolutely awesome for Texas. What a great sign for them. They've obviously saw something, figured it out, and got him engaged. And then you have your usual suspects after that. Shane McClanahan in Tampa Bay, Garrett Cole in New York, and then Shohei Ohtani in LA. So, Robbie, this one's sensitive for you, so I'll let you make your pick first as to who you want to go with. But I know my answer.
Yeah, I'm going to pass on Ohtani here because there's an MVP conversation to have, which isn't really a conversation in my mind, especially when you hit fantasy contribution in. So as a pitcher, as I mentioned earlier, he's a top 75 player at the break. That's overall player, not just like a top 75 pitcher, which wouldn't be anything to sneeze at. Cole has been a workhorse this year, but it has not been clean, tight, and tidy. And the Cy Young doesn't have to have an amazing track record. They have to have an amazing stat line. So Eovaldi, to me, is the winner in this one. But I got to say, there's a second half to be had here. And I don't know that we'll be saying that at the end of the season. There might be a couple of blips here in Texas. But for a rotation that has gone through some serious trauma this year, Eovaldi is holding it together with the Rangers. And credit to him. McClanahan, he might just become a perennial guy, right? Like he'll have his time. He's one of those, like his year will come, and maybe it'll be the second half of this year. He'll turn it on even more. But I'm going to give it to Eovaldi because I think credit where credit is due, right? This was someone you did not really want to roster the previous few years. who had a track record as your SP3-4 guy, not your leader in the clubhouse. And all of your fantasy leagues right now, dynasty leagues specifically, whoever has him, I am sure is looking to sell him because they don't know what's coming in the second half. The problem you're going to run into is unrealistic trade return. I don't know how all of your leagues are set up, but if you're allowed to trade draft picks, you're going to be expected to give up your first round pick, your highest pick, plus. And I don't know that that's something I want to pull the trigger on. If it's a keep forever dynasty league, I still don't know that's something I want to keep. Once upon a time, everybody thought Adam Wainwright was toast. And since that point, he had 3 competitive seasons. But you wouldn't at the time when he was having his last good season, you wouldn't have said, I'll give you the house. And I think that's what people might be asking for with Eovaldi.
And one other one that's just an absolute dark horse in the AL that I think is worth mentioning because it's a huge bounce back. And honestly, this could actually be the AL comeback player, Robbie, who we didn't talk about. And that's Zach Eflin, right? Is a guy has been dominating.
Wow.
So like that actually could be the comeback on the AL side very easily. But he's not that far off on the ERA count. He's right there with the win totals. His whip is good. His strikeouts are good. Like he has been as good as Tampa Bay possibly could have thought he could be. And we talked about this going into the last couple of seasons, just that there's enough stuff here for this guy to be good. And he's finally showing that, which is awesome.
You know who I did forget, Ty? Sorry. I just, as far as a comeback goes, somebody that I wanted to mention and I completely forgot was Mitch Keller with the Pirates. 9-4 this year, 3.31 ERA, 12 quality starts. And Mitch Keller.
Sorry, did you say comeback or?
Hello, is it me you're looking for?
So for those who don't know, you don't drop many of those anymore. That's the post hype, and Mitch Keller absolutely fits on that. Last year he cleaned it up, right? He had a decent line in 159 innings, decent ERA, 391. But this year it's at 331. He had 13 quality starts last year. Like I said, he's at 12 right now. 5 wins last year, 9 already, 12 losses last year, 4 to the point this year. A lot of credit goes out to him. If I'm Pittsburgh, I am looking to make a considerable return deal for him because you need to be thinking about the SP3-4 types that your rotation is going to need. And with Rosemary Contreras possibly being the non-legitimate starter, I don't know what we want to call him right now. Like he's very much doing what Mitch Keller did, right? Very similar track record. You might want to make sure you've got some legit guys because Pittsburgh has been rolling some dogs over the last few years. Definitely. And you don't want to be looking at that. You want to possibly turn Mitch Keller into like 2 lesser guys who can pump 170 innings the next couple of years. Anyway, sorry.
My pick here is McClanahan. I'm just going to say it.
I figured that was the guy.
I think the vote is just for him. I think they want to stick it to Cole anytime they can. I think Ohtani's the MVP, like you said, and in Eovaldi, I don't think the votes. They're not going to sympathize.
They're not going to go for it.
If he is as elite as he's been at certain moments, like for a big stretch, I just don't think he's going to be as consistent as McClanahan, and I think that's where he's going to lose.
He might need one of those. Sorry, Ty. He might just need one of those Septembers to remember, right? Where it's like important matchups, and he's doing like for his 22nd win, and for Texas to clinch, and those kind of things might be the markers he needs. Whereas McClanahan wouldn't need the storylines; he's got the stat line.
If he blanks Houston twice down the stretch, it's his, right? Like that's kind of the ballpark because they're going to need him to do that if they're going to win that division.
Sorry, blanks Houston.
Yeah. Because Houston's coming for their spot in Texas, right? So that's a reality.
Yeah. All right. Switch it up to the NL.
Yep. Let's talk Kershaw, Steele, Gallen, Strider. That's the group here. Kershaw, Hall of Famer, shocking that he's having good season. His innings limit, pretty standard, right?
Yep.
Justin Steele's the big shock on this list. Gallen
absolutely
progressed slowly. I told you guys Steele was going to be good, coming in this year, right? I own him in a lot of spots. I told you guys this in the offseason. Steele was a steal. And here we are. And Strider is the one that I'm going to walk it back a little bit because I definitely thought there was a dip coming here, and he's done exactly nothing relevant or close to a dip. So, he's obviously been awesome. But for me, I'm going to go Steele here just as the dark horse because it's fun. I'm going to pick him. He was a guy that I wanted to succeed. He's been great. I think he's got the soft division here, Robbie, which I think is one of the relevant pieces here. He's going to have the
Yep.
matchups down the stretch against soft lineups. It's going to give him an advantage because the other divisions for these other guys aren't that. The two guys in the AL or NL West here don't have a good schedule coming home. And Strider, I just think's never going to be the ERA guy, and I think that's ultimately why it's going to be tougher for him to win it. Even though he's been great, I'm staying away from him for that. And Steele just ends up being the guy left.
Like what Strider has in strikeouts or K to 9, Steele has an ERA. Steele's got 2.56 ERA in 91 innings, but he only has 81 strikeouts. He's got 11 quality starts. I love the fact that Zach Gallen is good and was supposed to be good and has managed to, make it all happen. 11 quality starts for him, 3.04 ERA, 125 strikeouts, but he's pitched a lot more than Steele, 118 and a third. Kershaw, we know it's not going to happen. Like, yes, he's been good. Of course, if we're giving out the Cy Young right now, which is the idea here, I'm still not giving it to him. I'm just trying to very quickly look to see where he fit. He's on the IL right now, by the way. Very comical. That's where he landed. 105 Ks in 95 and a third innings, which is actually like on par for what he did last year. 2.55 ERA, 11 quality starts. So he is one-upped Justin Steele. So if we're going to give it to him, but I mean, for me, Ty, it's, same as you said. I wasn't believing Strider to be as dominant as he has been, but I got to give it to him. He's got 104 and 2/3 innings pitched, 166 strikeouts. That is massive. 11 quality starts, same as the rest of the field. 3.44 ERA. I can't get past 166 Ks without, giving him that award. It's unbecoming of a gentleman how often he strikes people out.
Well, and he's definitely going to be in the ballpark of 20 wins too, right? With that Atlanta team. So that's the other part of it as well. That's
a good point.
His biggest downfall in this conversation.
11 wins right now. Yeah, 11 wins right now.
And Steele's got the King Felix approach there, where he's going to be lucky to get 10 because his team sucks. And so that could be ultimately his downfall, even though he has 9 wins already. That if he gets to 15 wins, he wins it in a landslide because he plays for the Cubs.
On the opposite side of it, it's talking about playing for a shit team. JP Sears has 1 win. Like, I'm going to check his quality starts right now. I feel like he had 8 quality starts, 1 win for the poor guy. He's doing all he can. Sorry, 6 quality starts. My mistake.
And for those of you that are curious, like, Rob is the president of the JP Sears fan club. So if you'd like to join,
when Sears, the company, closed, and I found out about JP, I was all in. For those in Canada who know that Zellers is coming back, I wish Sears was coming back, but in a trade, and then I could return to be a Blue Jay fan. But in the meantime, I'm just trying to say, by comparison, JP Sears is on a horrible team and has 1 win. Sometimes you just don't get them, right? Keller last year was a good example of that.
Yeah.
He was improving, but he couldn't get the win total. So he's very, he's muted in fantasy because of that,
Agreed.
So anyway, all right. So who we giving the Cy Young to? We just kind of agreed to disagree. I said Strider, you're going with Steele.
I'm Steele. Yep. I'm going there. I like him as a dark horse. I think division stuff is going to matter. And Steele is going to be a guy that I think is going to be in the conversation. So
we'll throw that out on Twitter then. We'll put the NL first half Cy Young out there with those nominees, and we'll let the people tell us. So let's go to MVP.
MVP. Let's start with the NL because the NL or the AL one's less dramatic. So the NL side, you've got your usual suspects here: Robbie and Acuna, Freeman, Soto, and Betts. I'm going to throw Tatis in here because I think he's got to be there. He has to be. He has to be, right? And listen, if that Padres team makes the playoffs, it's going to be on the back.
This is first half. We're not projecting second half. We're first halving it. So based on the first half, he missed a month. He's out. It's Acuna. It's Freeman. It's Soto. It's Betts. Look at the boys. Stop projecting.
That's all I want to do, though. It's all I want to do.
Look, we talked about this in therapy this week. Okay, you need to.
You
need to stay in the moment and stop looking ahead.
Well, then the conversation's over, right? Because we obviously know it's Acuna. It has to be Acuna.
Right, yeah.
There is no other correct answer, right?
I agree. Thank you.
And that hurts me because I want nothing more than for someone else to be better than Acuna.
It's
nothing to do with Acuna at all, but.
In my opinion, the only argument for another guy is Betts because he's now 3 position eligible, right? So you've got an elite shortstop stat line, an elite second base stat line, and an elite outfielder stat line, all from the same player. You have to then determine where does your team benefit the most from him. If by chance you are a Marcus Semien guy, well, you don't need him at second base. So now he's between your shortstop and your outfield. His least valued position, I think, I'm kind of chalking this together here, is the outfield, because you can probably cobble together a decent outfield. But if you're lacking in shortstop or second base, Betts is just like crushing it for you right now. So as a dynasty owner, fantasy owner, you probably prefer Betts because of what he can do in multiple spots for you. Whereas with Acuna, he's just crushing all your categories, right? Yeah. Like he's helping you all over the board. And the steals, the stolen bases, he's probably got more just himself than some 30 team leagues do as their entire roster.
Yeah.
Like his
40. I mean, it's a great debate, right? But at the same time, like, production is what matters here, right? Who cares what position you play in fantasy awards, right? So for me, it has to be Acuna.
Okay. I just said that's the only thing I would argue is that Betts can put up a stat line in multiple positions. Acuna's single, but I agree. Acuna's stat line is outstanding. So we'll move to the AL. Like we said, far less interesting. We've got Tucker with Houston, Jose Ramirez with Cleveland, who's having a great season quietly, I will say. Yeah. Great season. And then, of course, Ohtani. You can call Ohtani. Oh, my God. Jeez, Ty's found the buttons again. You can call Ohtani as the hitter. You can call him as the pitcher. But when you combine him, as you should be able to, he's just the best fantasy player you can have. Now, I'm in a league. We are in a league where in order to use Ohtani to get stats in both positions, you have to make him your DH, which means you can't add him as your pitcher, and he also gets your hitting stats. That's how the league, determined it was the fairest way to have him. In another league I'm in, you just count, but it's a contract salary league. So he's just the most expensive player in the league, which is also what it should be. And I'm sure 1 year from today, he'll be paid that way in MLB. So we got Acuna and Ohtani as the MVPs. Now, something that people will be pretty interested in, I think, as well, some second half stars to be on the lookout for. So these are guys who have been on the surge, on the up and up, or people who just fell flat on their face to start the year and are now back in roles, but dynasty owners very well may have either forgotten or put them down a peg or two. So, Ty, I know you love catchers. Why don't you start?
Yeah, William Contreras in Milwaukee. I mean, this is an offensive player that Milwaukee did a nice job to get their hands on. I like him here. The only guy I'm going to throw in here, Robbie, that I like at the catcher spot, and it's mainly due to the failure of another player, like Danny Jansen in Toronto. I think could be a sneaky second half bump on the catcher side. Because I think he's going to get more at bats than people are projecting, because I think Kirk's just been really, really bad. So just as a thought there, like, Kirk has lost all sense of power, right? Like, nobody cares about his.
And last year's Silver Slug. Sorry, Ty. He was last year's Silver Slug winner for catchers. Yeah. So the fact that his hit tool is now the thing that's not working for him, that is his contribution at the major league level.
He's been very good defensively, Alejandro Kirk, but he's not that much better than Danny Jansen to put up with the lack of production on the offensive side. Right. So that's why I think, just as a sneaky guy, off like in a fantasy realm, a lot of people don't really put a ton of value on Jansen. So just as a fun note, first base, Nolan Jones in Colorado. Robbie, we spent a lot of season talking about him. He's finally got first base eligibility here in a lot of formats. So it's one thing to look at here. I've loved Nolan Jones. I thought he was going to be this guy. The power is starting to come around. I'm excited at the value that I got him for in a lot of spots, and I hope most of you that are longtime listeners have listened and got on the boat with Rob and I. But Nolan Jones is one that I think could have a very strong second half here. I'm with you on that one. My guy Jose Altuve at second base, I think, has just had such a bad first half injury wise that this is a great pick and a great acquisition opportunity, especially if you're in shorter term leagues or if you're in win now mode. Like, spend on Altuve. There's going to be some teams that are probably looking to start thinking about sunsetting him in dynasty formats, right? Start to look at how do I get young again? And if he's been struggling, odds are their team sucks. So, that's just, part of that cog in the wheel. I'll hand you shortstop, Robbie, because this is like your whole life in those two players.
My whole life. This is like the bane of my like this year. If I had to pick, like, what would you say what position have you punted this year the most in your dynasty leagues that you didn't mean to? And I would say it's been shortstop. And that's a mistake that I just thought I'd be able to cover. But like I said earlier, I traded Kim in one 30-team league. In another, I went with Mondesi, and I've got some very young prospects, but I don't have that immediate help. So I ended up making the trade for David Hamilton, as I mentioned. But Kim is a guy with San Diego who has been very good in the last month, and the playing time is there, which was a major concern when he signed. It was one of those head shakers. Why would you take that deal when you just don't know? But over the last month, he's had 84 at bats. That's full-time playing time. A 310 average, 903 OPS, 5 dingers, 5 stolen bases. What more can you ask for, right? You've got control, like 2-to-1 strikeout to walk, but it's been under 25% walk rate, but a 10%, or sorry, under 25% strikeout rate, about a 10% walk rate, and a good number for runs and RBIs. He's just doing damn well. And Ezequiel Tovar, who started the season, fell flat on his face, and Colorado said, you know what? We're sticking with you. We're going to send Jones down. We're going to start, burning candles at both ends on other guys, but you are going to stay and you're going to learn at the major league level. He rewarded them the last month. He's bat 295 with an 817 OPS, but you look at the year-end numbers for him, 260, 724 to this point. Dingers are still single digit, which is kind of a hidden thing for him. He's had 4 in the last month. Look for him to be much better. What we wanted to see was a bit more walking, a little bit less striking out. We haven't seen that. However, Colorado just keeps putting him in the lineup, and that's to his credit. Someone not on the shortstop list, Ty, who is worthy of mention is at CJ Abrams. I'm just trying to pull up his stat line right here because he is now officially going to be the leadoff man with the Nationals. Last month for him, 296, average 789 OPS, 8 stolen bases here. You are not going to get 25 home runs from him. He's got 7 to the point this year. That's kind of high for what I thought. Last year, he had, in the same number of at-bats, he had 2. This is somebody who's obviously getting better, improving, but he's doing it very quietly with the Nationals, and someone who is going to be hard to acquire, I think, just because the news of him becoming a leadoff hitter is supposed to somehow take off his fantasy value. So you may have missed that opportunity. But for instance, in Yahoo leagues, as of today, he is only 32% owned, and that's up 12%. So if you're in smaller leagues, his value's down a lot, and he could be somebody that you could possibly steal away from someone. So shortstop is a dynamic position, as always. We talked about how deep it is right now. Unless you're in a league with me, then it is as shallow as can be, and no one's trading. But there are some guys out there that you can go and look for. Kim, obviously, depending on your league setting, the person who has him either paid a hefty price for him, or he's got a big salary attached. So you're going to have to be careful with that. Tovar's stat line just doesn't look as dazzling. And maybe this year's crew of exciting prospects, you'd be able to trade Tovar. I don't know if you'd want to trade Jackson Churio, somebody like that, for Tovar straight up. That might not be a good idea, but Tovar is somebody who you can plug and play right now. And Colorado's never a bad spot to be, or never a bad spot to have a hitter in, right? That park is helped. Look at Randall Grichuk, for crying out loud. Look at his stat line. My God. Ridiculous.
I mean, listen, he's been a great player for a long time, Robbie, so let it go.
I saw in our headline thing here, Ty, I saw his picture, and I immediately thought, I need to mention Grichuk. I need to mention.
I also love our title of this episode. I was struggling with creativity and somehow stumbled upon the good job, have a sandwich. Which is great for first half awards. But third base, Manny Machado. I like this one, Robbie. Manny Machado is obviously my guy. Like, me and Manny have been around a long time. I still have a Manny Machado jersey. Orioles jersey. So
as a Jays fan, that you should be shot for that.
Not really, because like at that time they sucked. They were kind of post peak when I got the jersey, so it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting, but okay. But anyway, Manny Machado just usually is a middle of the season performer and has productive innings towards the end of the season. So, his production has always come late. The batting average is less. It's more up and down, Robbie, but his production, RBIs, runs, home runs, etc., generally comes in the second half. So I like this pick here. Michael Harris is a guy that I've tried to acquire in a couple spots, Robbie, at the buy low mark. Very few people buying. I'm with you here on this one. As a bump back here for Harris, I think we just saw the sophomore slump. He's coming through it. He's making
Oh
adjustments,
yeah.
and those last couple weeks have been stronger.
Oh,
Power starting
five
to show
home
up again.
runs,
Yep.
5 home runs, Ty, 5 stolen bases the last month, 341 average, 933 OPS. Michael Harris, I loved coming into the year. He struggled, then he was hurt, took the downtime, came back slow to get back into it. He's been rolling, just absolutely rolling. So he's been great. Will Benson is another one here. I know we mentioned him on a previous pod, but that's because he deserved it. He was one of those like, oh, he made their opening, the Reds opening day rosters. This could be interesting, right? He's got some power. He can steal bases, but it didn't come together initially. And with last year's, 55 at bats of terror in Cleveland with a 182 average, you didn't expect much. But really, since Will Benson's been back, 358 average, 1175 OPS, 3 dingers, 4 on the year for him, 4 stolen bases the last month, 7 on the year for him, and carving out platoon bats plus, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast. It's just a real positive thing. Now, this is not going to continue forever, but let's just enjoy it while we have it. The other guy is kind of a darling from last year, end of season with the Phillies. Matt Vierling came up and was good. He had a 246 average. I shouldn't say good. He was serviceable, 246 average, but he did have 6 home runs and 7 stolen bases what was it? 325 at bats. He was a little bit better in September, I guess. Anyway, gets the trade to Detroit, and it wasn't looking too good. But over the last month, 357 average, 987 OPS. That's in 70 at bats, 3 dingers, 1 stolen base. Hopefully, he's now hitting his stride. His thing again is supposed to be OBP and walking. 9 walks, 11 Ks the last month. I'm liking what Matt Vierling's doing with Detroit. He also has now earned third base eligibility because Nick Maton, who was one of the other guys who came from the Phillies in that deal, has sucked. And the other guy that Detroit had, who I also have, who came from Baltimore. Oh my goodness. I love that I can just check on my roster. I don't have to look at like the actual MLB team. It's because Tyler Nevin. Yeah, I'm looking at my terrible players that are on my bench in one league, and it's like everyone who should have been good, according to me. Matt Vierling has taken over, multi-eligible guy now. So Ty, I'm going to hand you the pitchers because that's less
and really quick on Vierling. He just has this smile that's so punchable too. Like I don't know if that's a good thing for your roster or not, but
that's an interesting observation that you've given
like
him.
It's like he has this grin. And you're just like, stop it. Stop doing that. Yeah. Like, but no. Okay. Anyway, moving through into the pitching side, we talked about Snell earlier. He's been the best pitcher in the National League over the last 30 days. Not even close. Like he's just been great. Very, very elite numbers. He's in a contract year, right? So he's clearly dialed in to get paid, and good for him. I think he's going to be a big part of what San Diego does here. They really, really, really like him in San Diego. Like he is a huge fan favorite. And again, I talk about this all the time. I watch a lot of the broadcasts. Like there's a love affair with Snell and the Padres. It's obvious. He was given the announcers like diamond studded Air Force Ones on the last game I watched. Right. So like there's just an inherent, I think he's going to stay. I think there's going to be a relatively long-term hometown discount given out here. Even though
I think that's such a huge it's going to be massive contract. It could be 200 million.
I just don't think he's going to get that. I think he has too much up and down. And the problem with Snell is that he, like the curveball doesn't land for a lot of strikes. So he's always so up and down. Like when he gets the swing and the miss on the curveball, he's elite, right? But if the team walks in and says, "Listen, we're just not going to swing at the hook," like he walks everybody, right? So like he has so much variability to what happens in his outings. So that's what concerns me with him. I think San Diego wants to lock him up. We'll see what happens. But moving to the second guy in this group here, Jose Barrios in Toronto has been great. I'm a little more concerned with him being like elite in the second half. I think he's refound his changeup, and he's able to pitch into lefties and righties again. And I think that's why he's seen the success we've seen from him this year. I think he's right where we want to see him. He's at the 3.4 mark on the ERA side. We're getting exactly what we want out of Jose Barrios, and that's it. So if that's a win for you in the second half, I like where he's back to. He's back to the guy that was stable and you could count on.
Right.
Just don't start him against the Yankees in the playoffs, and you're good.
Well, I was going to say
But
he's not the guy that came over from Minnesota to Toronto in the trade immediately.
correct.
That was the best version of Jose Barrios that existed.
Yeah.
The guy who the Jays are throwing out there now every fifth day is a good, reliable starting pitcher. And I think
actually think he's
acquiring.
better. I think he's better than that guy we got. And the reason I say that is he's using all of his pitches, right? The guy we got was a 2.5 pitcher guy, right? Like he just wasn't using all of the arsenal that he had. So I think this is a good evolution for Brios. So I think we're going to see some consistency, and I think this contract that everyone was scared about there for about 8 months is going to end up being real strong.
Okay.
Next year, I love this one, Robbie. You tossed in Jordan Montgomery here in St. Louis. I love this pick. This is an obvious trade candidate for St. Louis. They're gonna do some damage on that roster. Their front office came out today and said, "Listen, we're gonna trade some people." That was the hot quote. There wasn't anything else to it. We are going to trade people. Was the quote. So Montgomery's a guy that I think a lot of teams would look at. Very affordable left-handed arm, back of the rotation addition with big innings for the Yankees. I like what could happen there. So I'll hand you the next guy because I just can't possibly spin that positively.
Yeah, no problem. So this is the token LA Angel. Tonight I have chosen to discuss Reed Detmers. No, Reed Detmers is just like doing fine. And for example, 5 quality starts on the year, 4 in the last month. That's why we care. 3.38 ERA in the last month, 4.31 for the year. 39 Ks last month, 29 innings pitched. If you look at the overall year stat line, the only thing that looks good for him is the strikeouts, which means he'll have some value. But if you look amongst rankings, for position or whatever, he's nowhere near any leaderboard for anything. But the last month, he seems to be kind of honing it in. He did not have a great start before the All-Star break, 3 1/3, took the loss, blew up a bit. But now we've got the break back and refreshed. And within that one blow up, the other starts were all quality starts for the month, right? He was very good. So I'm saying here, Reed Detmers is somebody who came up quick with the Angels, which a couple of their last picks have, including Neto. And the guy they most recently just took in the draft is projected to possibly be the first guy up from that draft class. I think the Angels have somebody here that they're going to be able to rely on. And second half, I think, obviously second half and beyond, but second half, you might want to get yourself some Reed Detmers before that stat line further cleans itself up. And some of the guys who roster him realize, oh, he actually is good, especially if the consistency hits. You don't want three out of 4 starts to be good starts. You need, 5 out of 6, something like that. So if you're going to bank on and trust that he's going to do that for the stretch, I highly recommend you take him. Personally, I'm reaching out to get him, but in the leagues I have a need for pitchers in. He is owned by the teams that he is one of their top 2-3 guys, so they're not willing to move him unless I'm, entering the conversation with some legitimate starters. And at that point, why am I trading equal value, assuming Detmers is going to be an ace when I don't think I'm not saying ace. I'm saying SP 2-3 type guy here.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I struggle to put him that high. I think he's an SP5 at best. That's just where my read is on him.
I don't think the Angels, if you're an Angel, you immediately are SP3 to me. But we'll talk about Jose Suarez some other night.
That's tough. Yeah, I mean, Detmers hasn't bleached his hair blonde yet, so I don't know if that's if he's into that category just yet. Last guy on the list who is an ad hoc ad here for you. You say Kikuchi in Toronto. I mean, he's been solid. I think the carriage is going to turn into a pumpkin here. And
I should have put him as a comeback. I should have put him under the comeback first half.
No,
I would have been.
No way. No,
you don't think the
I mean, you have but you have to be relevant before you can come back.
But he was like, send him back. Like I'm just trying to look to see what the stat line exactly was for the Cooch. I know 5 quality starts first half. Like he's not sparkling, but he's just. Is this someone we want to look at for the second half as the star? I thought I'd throw that one to you, Ty, because I know you're watching his starts a lot more than I am.
Yeah,
I'm
like
a fan.
I like what we've seen, but at the end of the day, I think there's some fade here, and I think the realities of what Toronto has in the wings. Like Manoa's back, Hyunjin Ryu is going to be back, and if the Jays don't believe Manoa and Ryu can be the guys, then I think the scenario here is they're going to make a trade. Like I just don't see a scenario where Kikuchi isn't in the bullpen. I like Kikuchi as a bullpen arm. Like his stuff out of the bullpen for an inning or two is awesome. And the Jays desperately need a second lefty. So I think that's where he ends up. I just don't see any other path. And I mean, you can't possibly think of a scenario where Kikuchi's starting over Ryu. It's just not relevant. And listen, if there's a rebuilding team that's willing to give up a good starting pitcher, like sending Kikuchi back with a very reasonable contract with 5-6 innings, like the Jays have only really thrown him 5 innings for the most part. Like another team would be happy to run him out for a sixth, right? The Jays just like to overmanage their bullpen a little bit. And so I think him heading back as a part of a trade for a fifth starter, if they think they need one, I don't think is out of the realm of possibility. So just something there. I'm not there for Kikuchi. I don't think I'd be banking on it. I think he's going to lose innings, and I think that's the biggest reason to avoid it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to cover here. Obviously, we went through a bunch of different things. If there's someone we missed that you think we should note, again, hit us at the Dingers Pod. I'd be happy to add it and give some kudos in the next episode. But again, lots going on. We have a dynamic second half coming in here, and we're going to start talking about MLB draft. We start talking about trades down the stretch here. We're start talking about winning championships. So until next time, it's been Tyler and Rob here on Dingers.